I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, we ask the question, why in a recent front-page story was one expert quoted as saying, he wasn't too concerned about reported job losses in the construction sector. Meanwhile, another in the very same article says the current situation in terms of residential construction is the worst he has seen in decades. So where does that leave us? To worry or not to worry? We do know layoffs overall in the construction sector are happening in numbers not seen since the 90s. In BC, 6,900 job losses in February alone. In some ways, it just doesn't make sense because we've got a federal government, a provincial government, a municipal government, all tripping over themselves, making big housing announcements, big dollars, big numbers. Prime Minister Carney, early in his mandate, promised 500,000 residential units to be built annually. This was passing strange since Canada has only managed to build an average of half that in previous years. As well, major infrastructure projects are touted, fast-tracked, and all of this must be good for construction, right? But despite this political zeal to build, a number of developers are just walking away from projects that have already been approved. And many real estate companies have announced major layoffs. In addition, there are now thousands of already completed condos sitting empty, unsold in Metro Vancouver. What's going on? To help us understand the whole picture, we're joined by Gardner, President and CEO of ICBA, Independent Contractors and Business Associations. His members are on the front lines during this challenging time for the construction industry. Back in a moment with Chris. Gardner joins us. And Chris, I was thinking that the last time we did a show like this together, you were talking about the shortage of workers. Yeah. And now we've got a shortage of work. Now, how did that paradigm sort of turn on its head?
Well, that's a great point, because just 3 years ago, if you told me that, you knew of people who were electricians, carpenters, welders, and they needed work, they would be on a job site the next day. So to your point, contractors are now scrambling not for workers, but for work. And I think a couple of things have happened. Certainly it's most acute in residential construction. And there you have sort of a perfect storm of three influences that have come together. One is the cost of mortgage rates have gone up, so the cost of that people have to pay when they buy a home is higher. Construction costs have increased. And you have a situation now where you've got the market's frozen. And because of all of these things that have come together, contractors are now saying they're looking towards 2027. 2026, I think, is going to be an extremely challenging year for construction in this province. We just had, folks are talking about 87 pre-sales in the entire lower mainland year to date. So in basically the first quarter of this year. That number should be around 3,000. And so these are developers who are going out, they haven't got financing, but they're marketing projects. And that shows you that the market has collapsed. And so on the residential side of construction, we're seeing layoffs at a level we haven't seen since the 1990s.
So it's serious. It's not just a monthly thing.
No, I mean, these numbers do, when you see a monthly report from Stats, you have to wait a little bit for the data to prove itself out. But here's what's clear. Pre-sales are going down. Home sales are going down. Building permits are going down. Business confidence is going in the wrong direction. All of that has come together, and it's going to be a very, very challenging market environment for the construction sector, which is about 10% of our economy. And then when you add in real estate and the other associated parts of construction, you're probably looking at about 25 to 28% of BC's economy is under significant stress and strain.
So that is a serious issue. I was surprised that article that I referred to in my opening, where in one article, a certain individual says, oh, I'm not concerned, no problem here, nothing to see here in terms of job losses. And then you look at the numbers, which tell a different story.
Yeah, it's easy to say, like, sometimes people are a little too cavalier about what's happening in the economy. When you talk about job losses, we think over the last 18 to 24 months, we've lost close to 20,000 jobs in construction. So what is when you say a number like 20,000 jobs, what does that mean? Well, for every job that's lost, what you have is a contractor that has spent years building their business, building their teams, training, winning work, executing projects, now faced with laying people off. And for those skilled workers who are being laid off, it means a disruption in their career. It means a family that's now struggling to say, can we make the rent payment, the mortgage payment? What about all the sports and the activities for our kids? It means apprentices who aren't going to be placed and get their hours. So it's a significant shock because of the level at which these job losses are now rippling through the construction community.
It was interesting to me that we have a province with a premier EB. Ontario has a premier who has been in the paper twice in the last week saying there is a problem with housing. And so he's taken two initiatives. One is to say you get a year without the HST, which is 13% in Ontario. And it's not just for first-time buyers. Anyone buying a new home, anyone, investment, whatever, you get a free tax holiday for a year to try and bump up some of the sales and get people interested. And then he and Carney have announced that they are going to spend $8.8 billion to help all of these companies survive. And, sort of, he's taking actions. And I'm sort of wondering, do you think that in BC we're going to see active government helping housing?
Well, I think the challenge is that BC's got enormous potential. And I don't think BC's broken, but I think it's very badly managed. And that's the result of very poor public policy decisions. And that stems from elected officials not understanding how markets work, and certainly how housing markets work. And so what you have between the natural dialogue between the federal government, the province, and City Hall, and City Hall plays a very significant role in the housing equation, is a lot of finger pointing and less collaboration and communication. And generally what you have is one level of government going off saying, we're going to do this, in isolation of what other levels of government are doing or thinking about. And so what we need is more. There's not there's no magic or silver bullet here. You need coordinated policy at all three levels of government. And you don't see that. Premier Eby and his housing minister could sit down this morning with 10 builders and get into a room and say, what are 10 or 15 or 20 things we can do to take the costs out of construction? And so one of the challenges we have is that building codes can either change, they change too frequently. And every time they change, they add complexity and cost to home building. And so we've got one of our members who is working on 3 different projects in the Lower Mainland, and each one is built under a different building code. And as those building codes become more current, they become more expensive. And so you've got challenges with getting projects approved. And then once they're approved, it's a painfully long process. It could take 4 or 6 years to get a major housing project approved in the Lower Mainland. Then you've got the permitting process. And so it's not like City Hall goes away once the project's approved. You've got to go and get electrical permits and mechanical permits, and all kinds of different inspections have to occur. That takes too long. So you've got the codes, the approval times. You've got challenges with supply chain and the infrastructure that we have in the Lower Mainland, which moves goods, whether it's that steel and trucks and concrete and cement and lumber. It's an aging infrastructure that we simply have taken too long to renew. The Massey Tunnel is a great example. That Massey Tunnel replacement, we started talking about that in the early 2000s. So if someone was 5 years old at that time, by the time they go over the bridge or under the tunnel, whatever the final solution is going to be, right now it is a tunnel, they'll be in their mid-30s, a generation of lost opportunity. So on so many levels, governments have got to start coordinating. They're not doing that. And who pays for that? the contractors who are trying to build, and the home buyers who are trying to find houses to get into the market.
And so you mentioned the process and finally getting your approvals, but a lot of developers and contractors they get the approvals and they just can't make the business case work, so they walk.
Yes, and every time a developer walks away from a housing project, it means contractors who don't have work, it means materials that aren't being bought, skilled workers who don't have opportunity, and apprentices who aren't getting those jobs. And it's the cost of construction because of building codes that are too complex, the length of time it takes to get the projects approved, the inability to move our materials around as effectively as we should be able to. All of that compounds itself and ends up landing at the foot of the first-time home buyer who's struggling to find a way to make ends meet, to be able to buy these new homes. And the other big part of this is that we need to focus on our incomes have stagnated in British Columbia. They have not kept pace with inflation. So if you are thinking about buying a home, but you now look at the economy and say, well, I'm worried about my job. My paycheck hasn't really increased in terms of the ability to buy more. You're not likely to go out and buy a home. So until we fix, there's so much of this that needs stronger policy making, stronger leadership at the federal, provincial, and local levels. It's not happening. And there's just too much finger pointing at each level of government.
And of course, one of the other issues is development charges, cost charges. If your new development is going to pay for all the infrastructure for the go forward, the costs, they can't carry them. And so that was one of the things that's going on in Ontario right now, where they're starting to say, we're going to put money, we government are going to put money to bring down those DCCs so that we can start getting things built. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about the effect of our recent budget on the construction industry. We're going to take a break. Be right back. There were so many things hidden in that budget that we all saw recently, BC budget. But what I was surprised at, how much housing and building was hit in the budget. How did you see it?
Well, exactly. I mean, what was concerning is that you had these commentators go out there in some circles saying this was a good budget for construction or for infrastructure, when nothing could be further from the truth. And so what we saw was $7 billion taken out of the capital plan over the next 3 years. We learned a new word, repacing, which is a fancy government speak way of saying we're going to delay or cancel a project. So the Burnaby Hospital expansion, nearly $2 billion project, has been put on hold indefinitely. We saw the application of the PST now be applied to geotechnical services, architectural services, the engineering services, things that are important inputs into construction. So everyone's going to pay for that. And then we saw tax increases. The taxes for every British Columbian have gone up. So it's deficits and debt, as far as the eye can see. There's not one major independent economist who gave this government and their budget a passing grade. It's frankly, it's reckless and irresponsible. I think it's fair to say the finance minister has absolutely no credibility in the financial, business, or investment community.
And besides a couple, like the Burnaby Hospital, I saw them on the news recently talking about it and how much work had already gone into the plans and the amount of money that has already been spent, and then it's repaced, which you and I both know, like you're lucky if that comes back. But there were also, for instance, 7 long-term care projects that were in process that are just stopped. And we've got a population that's getting older and a need for all of those things. So all of those projects are all construction jobs, yep, and the surrounding skill sets that it takes to build them. And all of a sudden, they're just gone.
Yeah, we have a shortage of long-term care, but it's chronic. We've got, there's an estimate now that we've got a shortage of 2,000 beds that will accelerate to a shortage of 10,000 long-term care beds by the end of the decade. And so we have a deficit in infrastructure broadly defined. And that's everything from roads and bridges to housing, which we've talked about, to long-term care facilities, hospitals, schools, We've underfunded investment in this important infrastructure. It's hurting our economy. It's hurting our ability to build stronger communities. And the government seems oblivious to the on-the-ground impact of that. And so what we're seeing is, on the one hand, we know we have a shortage of skilled trades workers in this province, in this country, and yet we're not training enough people. And now we're in a situation where many of those folks are looking to go elsewhere. So 70,000 people last year left British Columbia. Half of them went to Alberta. And most of those people were sort of between the ages of 20 and 35. These are the people who are at the starting their careers. Some of them have skills. We want them here to build our communities, build our economy, and they're going to Alberta. Why are they doing that? Because they're going to make the same or more. They'll pay lower taxes. And in Calgary, you can buy either a home or a townhome. You can buy 3 of them for the price of 1 in Vancouver, and you can buy 4 for the price of 1 in Edmonton. And so if you can get through the winters and the fact that you're now a Edmonton Oilers or Calgary Flames supporter, what's wrong with that deal? And the reality is people are, Alberta's calling, and talent and capital are answering, and they're going to Alberta.
And the move is so easy when it's to Alberta, but I bet we're seeing them across Canada moving to places that are more supportive. Yep. I'm always thinking of the individual worker. Yep. If you were starting work on one of these big projects and then out of the blue it's canceled, but you had been planning on maybe it's a 2-year build, maybe it's a 3-year build, solid work for skilled tradespeople, and it just with a breath, it's gone.
Yeah, if you go back a few years, we were building the Coastal GasLink LNG pipeline, which was from the Northeast BC out to the facility in LNG Canada facility in Kitimat. We're also expanding the TMX pipeline. At peak, we had 20,000 pipeline workers working in British Columbia on those 2 projects. Those are high-paying, highly skilled jobs. Those projects are now finished and they've gone operational. And so what is the pipeline project that's underway right now? A very small one that's going to connect the wood fiber facility in Squamish into the Fortis line. But those 20,000 workers, there wasn't another major infrastructure project where they could be redeployed. Many of them went to Alberta, where they've got big projects, the Dow Chemical project being one, that are underway and requiring those skilled workers. I went to Squamish, spoke to 600 pipeline workers earlier this year, and it's a $10 billion project. Most British Columbians wouldn't know that it's actually being built. The skill, the expertise, the innovation that's on display is amazing. And the District of Squamish has fought that project every single step of the way since it was first proposed. They've never voted to approve it. And it's so bad that last fall, wood fiber LNG went to BC Supreme Court and is suing the District of Squamish for obstructing the project and costing them millions and millions of dollars. That's the welcome mat that we're giving, that we're saying, when the Premier runs around and says BC's open for business, and they look at a project like that and all the opposition, we're not sending a very good signal.
Squamish even tried to stop their housing.
Yep.
With the floating boat.
That's right. They now have 2 cruise ships because they didn't want the workers staying in town.
So how do we dig ourselves out, Chris?
Well, I think part of it is we have to understand what competitive advantages we have. So what we have is natural gas, that we have a 300-year supply of natural gas. The world wants LNG. We have critical minerals. We have enormous mining potential. We have a forestry industry that we need, that's in decline, that we need to resurrect. We have a highly trained and skilled workforce. We have everything we need. So we need to start thinking about how do we get our goods to market? How do we build the infrastructure? How do we approve these projects? How do we get to yes? Reflexively, we seem to be no, but maybe, as opposed to yes. How do we figure out how to compete on the world stage? The world has come knocking on our door a few years ago for LNG, and we said no. We said no to Japan. We said no to Germany. We said no to Poland. The world's coming back. We have a second chance. This time, let's say yes. If we get it right, it will create enormous opportunities for everyone in this country and in this province, and set us on a much better course to build stronger communities.
Well, we talked about how easy it is for a young person to look at the situation and decide it's a better deal maybe in Alberta. But how do you get them back? All those skilled labor folks that have left, how do you get them back? Or do you just have to say, we got to start training all over and start at that stage?
Well, I don't think we'll get some of them back. We're not going to get all of them back. But I think it starts with an attitude in government that says that people with ambition, ingenuity, free enterprise, people who want to take a risk, we should be encouraging that, working with them, rather than viewing them as a problem to be managed. And something happens in British Columbia and in large parts of Canada along the way of the small business that starts, the entrepreneur that hires 3 or 4 employees, and they're celebrated. And then they grow, and they grow from 5 to 25 to 50 to 500. And as they scale up and become more successful, the narrative turns. They're no longer the heroes that everybody will agree, wow, this is great. What a success story. This small business that was started by a family. Now they're villainized and demonized as being folks that should be taxed more and punished more for that success. We got to turn that story around. We should want entrepreneurs to grow and excel and be successful, and to create opportunities, invest back in the community. If you look at the construction industry, if you go to small towns across this province and go to Little League baseball games, you go to minor hockey games, and you look at the rink boards, you look at the sponsor boards, they're generally contractors. They're local businesses who are supporting people in the local community. And we should be celebrating that. We don't do enough of that. And it's very frustrating. There's lots of owners now. We have an aging workforce. We have an aging group of owners. And they will say, Chris, I'm not sure that if I was going to start this journey again today, that I could build today over the coming years, what I've built over the past decades. And that's a very sad statement and sad commentary on where we are in British Columbia.
Well, thank you for working so hard on this issue, and we trust you'll stay in BC,
Right.
please.
Yes, I'm staying.
And maybe we'll convince you to run for Premier.
Well, maybe.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Back in a moment. Economists, such as Jock Finlayson at ICBA, have been warning us the BC economy has stalled and that spiraling deficits are not going to help grow our revenue or help our businesses. Look around. Construction job losses are not the only red flags. So many retail shops now for lease. Favorite longtime restaurants closing their doors because they can no longer make a go of it. Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.